Coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast, ripping up everything off that. Back to back is not.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I am your host, as always, guys, Coach Steve. We have another amazing episode for you guys today. We are finishing up our, you'd say, Dynasty series, I guess you want to say, or so. But we are wrapping up with part 5 today, going over the rest of the teams that we have not talked about. And if you've been watching the entire show, we've been kind of doing it based off the NFL draft order. So these are a lot of the divisional AFC Conference, NFC Conference, Super Bowl teams that we've yet to talk about, and talking about some of the more important questions for Dynasty. We'll talk about a couple of big news that are going on, maybe at the Combine. But before we get into that, let me get in Coach Tyler here to the show. Coach Tyler, what's going on, bro?
What's up, guys? We do get to talk about the best team in the league today, the Houston Texans. So I'm very excited about that. But let's get into it.
Yes, absolutely. We will be talking about the Houston Texans. Nothing more to say about that. But, yes, we will be talking about a bunch of teams today. Before we get to that, though, I wanted to run through a few things real quick here. Obviously, the official tagging of T. Higgins happened today. So he is no longer on the market. But I wouldn't say never when it comes to him staying with the Bengals. We'll have to wait and see how that situation plays out for Cincinnati. But they weren't going to just let him walk away from the team. They figured a way to make him either be there or find a way to trade him for assets. So we'll have to see how that goes. NFL Combine happened over the weekend here. A lot of fun things. I don't know if Coach Tyler, if you got enough chance to kind of dig into that or not, if there's anyone that maybe stood out or disappointed you at the Combine.
Yeah, I got to see a little bit of the running, a little bit of the drills. I haven't gotten to do a full breakdown of it, go through and watch everything. But I feel like a lot of the people that were there, my rankings didn't really change all that much. I feel like a lot of the people that showed up and did the workouts, they really cemented what they were supposed to be. A lot of the guys that didn't work out really didn't lose that much ground. The guys like the Cam Wards or the Ashton Genties, the Ted McMillans, there wasn't a lot of guys that were real question marks. We got all the measurements that we needed from them. I don't really need a 40 time on a Cam Ward or an Ashton Genty to know that they're pretty good at what they do. But yeah, I feel like it really just cemented the guys that showed up. There wasn't really anyone that I was outstandingly displeased with, but also no one that I was really overly surprised with. I feel like going into it, everything just kind of went exactly how it was supposed to. It may have not been the most exciting combine in the world, but at the same time, it helps us as dynasty managers because we've been talking about a lot of these guys, even going through, November and December as the college football playoffs were starting. And so I think that a lot more was cemented than anything really changed in my book. And again, that isn't going through and watching every rep of every player that's done everything. But it was uneventful in the best way possible.
That's a fair way to put it there. At one point, I swear, back in the day, I felt like they did a lot of the drills at night, like a lot of the 40s at nighttime. I felt like maybe they did the wide receivers kind of late, but I felt like it was all midday, and it felt like it was just oh wait, that just happened. The 40 times just went off. I felt like they used to do them at prime time night, where people would actually maybe tune in to watch. I don't know, maybe that's just me. I swear I remember that happening, but. Yeah, I mean, the Combine, I haven't done all my research yet in terms of these rookies, so I'm still digging through some things there. I know that if you like numbers, I'm currently working on a second part 2 article of looking at Combine testing and how it relates to fantasy. It's obviously not the biggest thing, but there are some numbers that really stand out there. I have it over on Dynasty Nerds, so if you want to check that out, it's really cool. I'll be posting part 2, the updates from the 2025 class, but there's definitely some interesting things here. Real quickly, I'm not going to go too much into this, but Omarion Hampton, and Tyler, going to have to help me out here, but the guy who ran the fastest 40 time for running backs,
Bashul Tootin. I think
Thank you. Yes, they both ran not bad. They both ran not good shuttle testing runs, and like history has shown, running backs who have run like poor shuttle runs don't usually perform well in fantasy over the last 10 years. I did my analysis over the last 10 years. So like weird little things like that, like I was able to find these things. Again, they're not saying that these guys are going to be bad, but if in 3 years we're talking about this and they're not good, I might have found something. But little things like that. So if you like numbers, definitely go check that out there. But in terms of like, who would like, I think there was the running backs performed as they were supposed to. And I was really happy about that. All the running backs were able to perform very well. I didn't really have much issues with that. We didn't really see a lot of quarterbacks in terms of testing. Obviously, the big names kind of avoided the NFL Combine, as they should, because at worst they're going to just continue to hurt their stock. The tight ends, I feel like, had a bunch of a disappointment. Outside the top 3 or 4 guys who didn't really do much, there were definitely some disappointments there. Overall, they ran really bad 40s. Wide receivers, for me, I think it was just kind of average across the board here. I wasn't overly concerned with too many people there, but we're going to find a lot more about these guys over the next month as we go to their stadiums and as they go to more testings. And NFL draft is just a short 2 months away at this point. And it's going to get real exciting. But we're getting a rookie talk another time here, but we're going back into our dynasty talk here. And thankfully we have a trade, which kind of helps with our very first team we're going to talk about here tonight here. And let me pull that up. Over the weekend during the NFL Combine, I lost my thing here. There we go. Deebo Samuels got traded to the Washington Commanders as it loads up here. I hope there it is. Obviously, he got traded for a 5th-round pick. This is the final year of his contract that he signed a couple years ago with the 49ers. He's being shipped off to the Commanders, a team who is looking to win now. They're getting a 5th-round pick back. And now Deebo, 29 years old, heading to a new team here. And before we get into this talk in general, let's look at what this Commanders offense kind of looks like now. I mean, obviously we have Jaden Daniels at quarterback. Obviously everyone has him as a top 3 fantasy dynasty quarterback right now after an incredible rookie season from him, especially for fantasy football. And then it's not even just his legs. It was the arm talent that he showed, which made it really a big difference. The backfield, has Brian Robinson Jr., Austin Eckler. Again, at times they were really decent in fantasy. They were, solid placeholders for bye weeks. And, when you're just lost a guy for the week or 2 here, and then you're going to mix in now Deebo Samuels to this backfield. That's going to be real interesting. That we'll talk about in a moment. Now, wide receivers, obviously Deebo slides into, the 1A, 1B, however you want to say it, with Terry McLaurin. And that's going to be a fantastic duo for Jaden Daniels there. They have Luke McCaffrey. They drafted high last year. Nami Brown had the playoff hopeful out of him. Noah Brown was pretty solid veteran, may or not probably be back now that Deebo Samuels has signed. And then tight ends. Zach Ertz may or may not be back with the team. It seems like they're really trying to make a run for it. Wouldn't be surprised if they do bring him back. But again, there's also a guy like Ben Sinnott, who I know Coach Tyler liked a lot last year. I know after he told me about him, I started really liking him a lot too. And, he could be someone who jumps up into year 2. But, let's stay with the Commanders before. We're going to talk about the 49ers real quick too, but stay with the Commanders here in this offense here. What does this offense, who gets hurt in this offense now that Deebo Samuels is here? Coach Tyler.
Honestly, Deebo Samuel probably. I feel like it honestly could work more against Austin Eckler than really any of the receivers. Just looking at how Deebo was used in San Francisco, I don't think that he will be, the exact same usage as a player, but being able to switch up this offense, switch up the looks, and throw a guy like Deebo back there who, hasn't looked outstanding over the past couple seasons. He's had, some high points, but really, I think it's Austin Eckler. He's a guy that we didn't really speak too highly of last year. And he went out and put up a pretty good receiving season, 35 receptions, 366, somehow no touchdowns. But he's not getting any younger, and he's not really getting any healthier either. So I think it's just going to be a battle of which one can stay healthy, Deebo or Eckler. But I think, honestly, it hurts Eckler more than any of the receivers, because I feel like Luke McCaffrey didn't really have any role solidified. De'Ami Brown and Noah Brown both, showed flashes, had some big plays, maybe a big game here or there, but no really established roles in the receiver game. And so I think that as Eckler deals with injuries, as Eckler is sort of, a change of pace guy who's really doing most of his work in the receiving game, that's exactly what Deebo Samuel really was for the 49ers backfield when he was there. And so I doubt Cliff Kingsbury looks at that and his usage and what he's been able to do in the past out of the backfield and just sticks him out as a receiver for the entire game.
No, I mean that's definitely fair to say. For me, I think to me it lands more in the tight end situation. Deebo is going to see targets in this offense. I mean, the important thing for Deebo is to stay on the field. He's missed 11 games over the last 3 years. Just little things like that can really hurt. We know that the Commanders, I think it's still FedEx, or maybe it's something else now. FedEx Field, isn't a great field for NFL players, as we've known many times of many players getting hurt on that field. And Deebo is definitely the type of player that loves to get hurt for some reason here. If I'm looking at a potential person who might get hurt, I think it might be the tight ends. Cliff Kingsbury, in his time in Arizona, he didn't really have like elite offenses. Again, it was with Kyle Murray. Jaden Daniels is more proficient passer overall than Kyler Murray was in his time in Arizona. But, Zach Ertz was the second leading pass catcher on that team there. Will that bring him down? Will that stop Ben Sinnott from getting that year 2 jump if they don't go back with Zach Ertz? That's the thing that I think could concern me for the tight end situation, whether it's Zach Ertz or Ben Sinnott, that Deebo Samuel takes the targets and it actually helps lead to Terry McLaurin seeing more targets because who's been the best number 2 wide receiver? Terry McLaurin's been across from half his career. Curtis Samuel? No Brown. Like who's been his number 2 wide receiver next to him in lineups? It hasn't been great. So like having a Deebo Samuel there will definitely take pressure off from McLaurin, and I think it might boost his target share a little bit, while I think maybe hurting the tight ends just a little bit from being elite to being more of a touchdown dependent group than what we saw this past season. So, but is this your opportunity to sell high on Deebo?
I think the excitement could bring, a sell high opportunity if your league mates are open to it. He's not a guy that I would really view extremely highly. He is going to Washington, and there was excitement and still is excitement with Jaden Daniels. But I mean, you look at Deebo, he hasn't posted a full season played in his career. And he's 29 years old. Like you said, FedEx Field, not known for being the greatest of turfs and playing grounds. And so, that doesn't help Deebo, who's just known for lower body injuries. So if you could sell high on him, I'd happily do it. I don't think his role in this offense expands from anything it was in San Francisco. And I think he's just going to be not necessarily a gadget only guy, but I think he's going to be just kind of here, there, and everywhere, and you're not going to be able to predict what he's going to do. I would say this is a better offense. I don't know if I'd go into better coaching offensively. I love Cliff Kingsbury, wreck him. But I think that Shanahan runs a more efficient offense. And in that, I think Samuel had a great place. But I don't see a spot where I'm overly excited to have Deebo Samuel on my team. So if you could sell high, I'm happily selling high.
Yeah, I mean, if one of the contending teams want to give me the 111, the 112, I'm happy to take that for Deebo Samuels right now. I think that the rushing upside that he has had the last few seasons for the 49ers, I don't think that's going to be there to that extreme level. I think they want to bring Deebo as more of a wide receiver option for Jaden Daniels, someone to, help open up the middle of the field a little bit more. And downfield, while I think they have a good running back core that they're going to stick with. I wouldn't be surprised if they even added somebody in this class here because it's so deep and they're, Brian Robinson heading to his final year, Austin Eckler also heading into his final year. I wouldn't be surprised if they take a shot at a running back as well in a little bit of later round. But I think Debo, may have some upside as a wide receiver too, but the floor of an entire season for him could end up being outside the top 36. Despite this offense, people really liking this offense. I think there's a lot of boom or bust with Debo Samuels, and I'd rather get out of it now than wait for him to maybe have a big week, but then get hurt the following week. If you can't trade between then you're screwed. And then because no one's going to want a 29-year-old who's been getting hurt in his 29-year-old season. So definitely hurts. Jaden Daniels, obviously, I wouldn't say it's a big upgrade, but it's definitely a nice security blanket to have another elite wide receiver on the team, despite what we think about his injury concerns. And then, that's really about it. And they probably should not expect any Luke McCaffrey year 2 jump. And if that's not the case, it's going to be really hard for him to see any future fantasy success. It's going to be tough for that guy, but we'll have to wait and see on that. So, all right, let's head over to the next team on our list here because we used before we go real quick, let's go over the 49ers real quick. And obviously, seeing Debo leave there, it's going to open up the door for some players on the 49ers side of the ball. Is Ricky Pearsall a big buy right now for you? Are you taking this chance to sell high on him?
I'm taking this chance to sell high on him. I don't know. I'm kind of in between on Pearsall because, we did see some games where he produced extremely well, right, against some terrible secondaries. I will say that. But, those last couple of weeks of the season against Detroit, he went out and put up 8 receptions on 10 targets for 141 and a touchdown. And then against Arizona, put up 6 on 8 for 69 and a touchdown. So he's putting up, some pretty substantial weeks, but I just haven't seen enough of him to trust that he's going to, slot into the wide receiver 1 role. Really the person that intrigues me most with this trade, the person that I'd honestly probably buy, and a guy that I've been saying to buy since the offseason started, is George Kittle. He's been really the main target for Brock Purdy since Brock Purdy's gotten to San Francisco. And we saw that a ton this past year. And now with, one of the lead target getters being gone in Debo Samuel, and then, who knows what's going to happen with Brandon Ayuk? Is he going to be healthy? Is he going to be traded? Is he going to just be a free agent? Is he going to go play baseball? I don't know. But George Kittle really is the one on the 49ers offense I feel like that benefits most from this. And he, like I said, he's a guy that you go out. He's probably the cheapest elite tight end you could buy in terms of fantasy value, and the fact that he's not Travis Kelce and probably going to retire after next year. So I think that if I'm buying anyone on the 49ers, I'm going after Kittle. I don't hate Pearsall as a buy, but I also don't fully trust that he's just going to slot in and get, 120 targets next season.
That's fair. I mean, you kind of have to take with the good with the bad. I mean, this is probably not the best time to buy him because his hype's going to be so high, and you're going to be maybe paying an overpayment early on right now. Maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month ago, you could have probably gotten him for a second and a fourth, probably. I would assume now that people are going to want probably elite first, a couple seconds, for him now. I think that's where his value is kind of sitting now at. And again, his value could even go higher if he ends up performing well. Remember, he had a crazy situation early on in the season. It took time for him to kind of get things going. And, he flashed at points throughout the season there. Big plays, too. And, you had a Debo Samuel who really wasn't very efficient. You had Juwan Jennings as a great slot wide receiver. So, it is potential for him to kind of take a step in year 2. I would probably be more on, if I had the 109, I'd probably consider getting Ricky over the 109. And that's only if I need a wide receiver. I think there's a talent that is there, but it is a risky move, though. You have to assume that he's going to take that next step, and maybe they're even trade Brandon Ayuk too. So his value could even jump even more in the next few months. If that's the case, he could go from the wide receiver 4 or 5 to the wide receiver 1 on this team really easily. So we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, Debo to the Commanders, definitely very interesting. But let's get over to the next team here. Coach Tyler's Houston Texans here. Obviously, CJ Stroud going into year 3. The Houston Texans seem to have found their franchise quarterback. Probably not the best season that we think everyone wanted from him going into year 2. But again, he's still very young. Running backs, Joe Mixon, had an elite season while he was on the field, but availability is an important thing for Dynasty. Dameon Pierce kind of fell off the map, kind of ran right back on the map, and then fell off again, kind of, but then ran back on right at the end of the season. We'll have to see kind of what the Texans do with him. Wide receiver-wise, they have a lot of different things going on there. Obviously, Nico Collins is a locked and loaded wide receiver 1 right now. Tank Dell is likely to miss a significant time going into 2025 with a nasty injury he suffered late in 2024. Stephon Diggs is a free agent. Don't know if they're going to bring him back or not. We'll have to wait and see. And then they have a bunch of guys who, Xavier Hutchinson's had opportunities. John Mechie kind of had opportunities. Bob Woods is, aging out vet. Again, they don't really, in reality, you could say they don't really have even a wide receiver 2 on this team at the moment. And then tight ends, Dalton Schultz, again, kind of an average season out of him. There's definitely some good news with the new OC, though, that I just recently read about. So I kind of like Schultz a little bit there in terms of sleeper. Cade Sofer is a tight end I really do like, who I think can progress going into year 2. Someone who I would consider buying low because we're not going to go in depth about him. But Texans have some weapons here and there. I think they felt better last year for Dynasty, but this year they're kind of mixed, and it kind of all starts with the quarterback situation here with CJ Stroud, and he's been solid. Don't get me wrong, great franchise quarterback for the Texans has way able to scoop up here. But for Dynasty, for fantasy-wise, you're looking at back-to-back just 20 touchdown seasons, doesn't really have a rushing floor. Coach Tyler, are there concerns for you with CJ Stroud as a fantasy quarterback? Not so much, obviously, for the Houston Texans, who I know you love, but for fantasy, is Stroud really have that top 5 or 6 upside?
I don't know if I'd say Stroud has a top 5 or 6 upside. I personally have him at a high QB2 just for the 2025 ranks.
Okay.
I feel like that's a good place to have him. You look at last season, and the biggest thing that it surprised me as a Texans fan. All these calls were coming in about Bobby Slowick going out and being a head coach somewhere, and then he came in and put out probably his worst year as an offensive coordinator. I could have telegraphed the entire offense for you because it was run the ball, get about 2 yards, and then throw it. And then every once in a while, he'd run it on 1st and 2nd down and get a 1st down. But Stroud was put in a lot of bad situations that he had to dig himself out of. And, like we looked at that receiver list, he has very good, name value receivers, and he had them going into last season, right? Nico Collins had established himself as a wide receiver 1. You get Stephon Diggs in the trade. You get Tank Dell coming back off of a season-ending injury that shouldn't have happened last year. And honestly, the one this year shouldn't have happened either. But he was just really dealt a bad hand as you go throughout the season because that trio of receivers that was supposed to be groundbreaking and take the Texans to the next level played, I think it was 5 games total throughout the season while they were all on the field together. I think it was 4 start-to-finish games where they were all healthy and on the field. And outside of that, it was just, a carousel of Nico Collins goes down in week 5, and then Stephon Diggs goes down in week 7 or 8 with his torn ACL. And then you finally get Nico Collins back, and he's starting to look healthy. And then you lose Tank Dell to a, freak accident in the back of the end zone where he still holds on for the touchdown, which is still amazing to me. But even with the weapons around him, like you said, Stroud doesn't have a ton of running value. But we even look back at the great fantasy season the great rookie season that Stroud had last year. And he was still the 11th quarterback in, standard quarterback scoring for a point per touchdown. And that was 4,100 yards and 23 touchdowns with 3 rushing touchdowns, which he had none this year. I think, like you said, the new offensive coordinator, Nick Caley, coming in, I think he will help this offense be more efficient. Coming from the Rams and McVay, they know how to run an offense, and we'll talk about them in a little bit. But I don't think that Stroud has, the quote elite value as a quarterback, but I think as a low-end QB1, high-end QB2, if the Texans are able to keep guys healthy, I'm perfectly fine keeping him there. And I think that that's exactly where he needs to be, because he is, for the most part, the standard pocket passing quarterback that we think about.
Yeah. No, I really do agree with everything you kind of said there. I think there is some leeway with CJ Stroud. He's never going to be a rushing quarterback. Let's put that out of the way, obviously. He's never going to be a really mobile quarterback. But I think there are kind of like a Joe Burrow elite season where he's putting up 4,500 yards and 40 touchdowns. I think that is a season still in his cards. Again, he just needs more talent, unfortunately, around him. He needs better offensive line help. His offensive line was not great for him this past season here. And, when he started losing his weapons, he started throwing interceptions. Like, he had 12 this year. He had 4 through the first 9 weeks. Not bad. 4 through the first 9 weeks is not terrible at all. But then you lose all your wide receivers. You don't have a healthy Nico Collins, I would say, for probably the rest of the season after he came back from injury. There's no way he's fully healthy. And then you lose Diggs, you lose Dell at times. Dalton Schultz was in and out of the lineup at times too as well. But I think there just needs to be emphasis on getting more protection around Stroud and giving him weapons to be able to throw the ball to. They did that this year. They tried it, and unfortunately, it failed using a lot of older players. It's just what happens sometimes with older skilled position players. They just don't pan out for you in fantasy. So I think there isn't concerns, but you have to readjust your expectation. I think people were taking Stroud in startup leagues and the top 3 or 4 pick because his upside as a passer. But I think we need to kind of dial it back down where I still have him as a high and there's a low QB1 in Dynasty still. I still think there's upside in his passing game that makes him really special. But I don't know if he's a top 5 quarterback right now in Dynasty, but he's still, I think to me, is still a top 10 Dynasty quarterback right now moving forward. All right, over to the next one real quick here. Does Joe Mixon still have another elite season left in him? Obviously, when he was on the field, he was averaging almost 20 fantasy points a game. He almost scored in almost every single game he played fully. But after their bye week in week 14, the final 4 games of the season, it just kind of did not look like the same player. Kind of things started to tip off with him. They stopped running him 20 times a game. I think he was went from 15, 14, 9, and 7 the last 4 weeks of the season here. He's going to be, I think, 30 years old this past coming season, if I'm not mistaken, or at least 29. Do you believe Joe Mixon, Coach Tyler, still has one more elite season in him?
I really think that he does. One thing that flew under the radar a lot this season is that against certain coach's favorite team, the Miami Dolphins, Joe Mixon got hit with a, what was called a hip drop tackle, and it, limited him in the fourth quarter of that game with, a unspecified ankle injury. They just said it was something with his ankle. He tweaked it, whatever. But, he looked for the most part decently fine before that ankle injury. And like you said, before the injury, before their bye week, which was week 14, the injury occurring in week 15, he was averaging 21 points a game. That's pretty elite if you ask me. And so I look at it, he was getting, obviously, he was averaging 23 plus carries a game. And so obviously he was getting the workload that you would want. Plus he was finding work in the receiving game. But it's only after that injury that you see those numbers fall, right? Against Miami, 12 for 23, still came in with 5 receptions. Against Kansas City, who is a tough run defense, 14 for 57. And then against Kansas City in the playoffs, he would put up 18 for 88 and a touchdown. And then you have Baltimore, who that game is just, I would love it if that was burned from everyone's memory because I really wish it was from mine. 9 carries for 26 yards. And then Tennessee that last week barely played, I think, the first or second drive and put up 5 for 23. But you look at before the injury, right? We had, a couple missed games between weeks 3 through 5. But in PPR scoring, week 1, RB2, week 6, RB2, week 7, RB4, week 8, RB6, week 9, RB15, week 10, RB8, week 11, RB1. He had RB12 or RB21 in week 12, and then an RB4 going into the bye week. Those sound like elite numbers to me. And so I think, the Texans supposedly, if they aren't, then I really need to drive up to that front office and go yell at them. But they're supposedly taking a good look at that offensive line. And, the wide receivers weren't the only position group that fell victim to injury. But boost to the offensive line, plus, the health of Joe Mixon. Like I said, you go into those last 4 games or those last really 3.5 games, if we're counting that Miami game that he got injured, he's running on a bum ankle, and he's putting up running back 3 numbers. It's not insanely great, but he also wasn't getting the same workload because he was hurt. But you go into the playoffs, wild card weekend against the Chargers, he goes 25 for 106 and a touchdown. And then, like I said, against Kansas City, he goes 18 for 88 and a touchdown. So once he had some time to rest, it started to look a little bit more like the Joe Mixon that we saw earlier in the season. And I think that he has another season left in him. Do I think he's going to get the exact same workload? I hope not, or I hope it's in a lot better situations. But nothing outside of this bum ankle that he was running on the last 4 games of the season makes me think that he doesn't have another one left in him.
That's fair. I can see kind of where you are with that there. I feel like there's a little Texas bias, but I'll just let that slide. All right, let's keep going and go to the next team here. We're at the Los Angeles Rams here. Obviously, the Rams were able to figure it out with Matthew Stafford. He will be staying as a Los Angeles Ram. He will not be traded this offseason. They were able to work out a deal with him so that he is still staying there. Been a solid quarterback, obviously, with the Rams, despite when he's injured. Running games, Kyren Williams, just dominant force the last 2 years for fantasy football. Just been a monster in fantasy. The team drafted Blake Corum this past year. Didn't really get too much from him this past season, but we'll have to see if McVay wants to start using more than just one back. But he's been mostly a one-back guy, so we'll have to wait and see. Wide receiver-wise, Cooper Kupp likely on the move somewhere. If not, they're probably going to release him before they, get the season really going. But Cooper Kupp is likely not to play in Los Angeles coming year, which means Puka Nacua is going to be the primary wide receiver there, sitting on top. Just been a dominant force since he's entered the league as well. Really fantastic for fantasy. DeMarcus Robinson is a free agent. They had Jordan Whittington, who kind of flashed a little bit, Tutu Atwell, a couple guys like that. Tight end wise, Tyler Higbee has been just a stable at tight end for the Rams. He came off a major injury, but looks like he looked pretty healthy towards the end of the season there, which is great. Davies Allen is a young guy they do have that they're trying to groom, but this team still runs kind of through Tyler Higbee at tight end. So starting off with our first question for the Los Angeles Rams here. What's the value for Puka Nacua right now? Do you see Puka in future competition for the number 1 wide receiver spot, battling Chase and Justin Jefferson? Or is he kind of just, sitting there kind of a couple back from him, doesn't really have that, wide receiver 1 overall future value?
Yeah, I have Nacua as a top 5 guy right now. If this, we had this written up before we knew Matthew Stafford was officially going to be back, when we thought he might be on the Raiders, and that would have definitely posed a different question for Puka Nacua's value. But I feel like Matthew Stafford being there, he retains that, wide receiver. He's a top 5 wide receiver easily. This year, he was 2nd overall in points per game at the wide receiver position, beating out guys like Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown, like guys that he's going to have to compete with to be that possible number 1 wide receiver. And obviously, he fell far behind Jamar Chase, just like everyone else did from this season. But I think with just the offense being able to focus on him, we see we'll see a lot of games like what we saw when he first entered the league, right? Those, 11, 12, 15, even possibly 20 target games. Because Stafford is really good at supporting a wide receiver. And with Cooper Kupp supposedly on the move somewhere, I think that opens the door a lot more to Puka just being, force-fed targets, but being force-fed targets by one of the better quarterbacks in the league, which is never a bad place to be fantasy-wise. And so I still have him as a top 5. I would obviously want to see more of this offense with no Cooper Kupp in it. And obviously that number and that value doesn't necessarily change with Cooper Kupp returning. It just more hinders his possibility of being the wide receiver 1 overall. But I don't think that his value has really changed, whether going higher or lower this offseason, with the return of Matthew Stafford and the possible exit of Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, no, I really do like Puka. I think people have really scored a gem with him. Obviously, it's just when he's on the field, he's just heavily targeted. People we're gonna figure out what is Puka without Cooper Kupp. I mean, what it was 50 targets and well over close to 100 fantasy points in 4 games. It's tough to say that Puka's value can't go higher than what we're already seeing at a good level. The issue with him has been touchdowns, and he's got, I think it's 4 and 5 over the last 2 seasons. That is what makes the difference between solid wide receiver 1 value and elite wide receiver 1 value like Chase and Jefferson. Looking at their numbers the last few years, Puka's got a lot of targets, but the yards aren't there, and the touchdown difference is widely different. And that's the key factor when it comes to Puka, is that he needs to start scoring more touchdowns. If you have him, I think you're set. You should be set with him for a couple more years before you consider making any moves. As long as Matthew Stafford is sitting as his quarterback, there's not much you have to really think about when it comes to Nacua. He's going to see 9+ targets most games and going to give you wide receiver 1 production as long as he's healthy on the field. So that's going to be key for him moving forward. So, all right, over to the next question here. Is it time to move off of Kyren Williams? Obviously just a dominant force the last 2 years, double-digit touchdowns. This past season, though, he had over 340 touches. High touches for a guy who's 5'8" and, just sitting around like 200 pounds here. He's not considered a bulky running back whatsoever, but is this a great time to move off a guy who's, he's in his prime, but do you think he's got another 300 touch season in him?
I don't know if he's got another 300 touch season in him. Hand up, I told you to move off of Kyren Williams last year because I thought that the Rams might add someone to this backfield that would be a real threat. Blake Corum was obviously not that guy. So hand up, I was wrong. But also hand back down, because I'm a re-jump on that train. It's not Kyren Williams' show anymore. Like you said, he had over 350 touches this past season. And so, or no, it was 340. I'm looking at targets instead of actual receptions. He was almost at 350. But either way, he is at 350 exactly. Never mind. I can do math sometimes.
That's
but,
all right.
Like you said, 350 touches for a guy that's not a Derrick Henry-sized running back. And, we do see, a missed game in there. It was, really the missed game was his bye week, but we see a couple snap percentages going down in some games. But he's just so worked. And this running back class, if you haven't been paying attention to all the rookie buzz, if you haven't been paying attention to the combine, or if you really haven't opened up Twitter and I haven't been on Dynasty Twitter, this running back class is supposed to be elite, right? Just guy after guy after guy of running backs that are going to come in and make instant impacts. And I would be hard pressed to see Sean McVay as a guy that didn't add someone to that backfield, right? Someone a little bit more of a threat to Kyren Williams touches than a Blake Corum. And, we looked at it last year. He had over 250 touches. And I was like, the Rams they have their guys for a year or two and they let them go, right? They get someone else in and it's just changing of the guard. And then they run those guys for a couple years and then they get someone else in and it's changing of the guard. Well, if we're looking at that being the trend, and we said that when he had 250 touches, why would we not yell that from the rooftops when he has 350 touches? Right. So I look at it.
Yeah.
It's probably the highest his value has ever been, but also a lot more people are going to look at his fantasy finishes on the week and his fantasy finish as a whole, and not the fact that he has had over, let's do some math here, over 600 touches in the past 2 years. They're going to overlook that. For a guy at his size, at his age, that's how we see a lot of running backs fall off. And I'm not saying he's going to fall and be, the next Todd Gurley who just disappears from football, but there's a chance the Rams bring someone else in and say, hey, we've gotten our 600 touches out of you. We'll bring you in every once in a while, but here's this new young Ferrari that we can run.
No, that's absolutely correct. I am a big advocate to sell on Kyren Williams this offseason. To me, it's the touches. He's a smaller guy there that I think will break down if he's not seeing some kind of split workload eventually. And Blake Corum was a 4th round pick, if I'm not mistaken, right? I think they took him in the 4th round. Yeah, so I don't think they're sold on Blake Corum being the number 2 guy there. If they find someone in the draft they like and with value, they're going to take him. And if that guy is good, which this class is really deep, Kyren Williams is going to see actual competition compared to this year where he was just seeing 80 plus of the snaps constantly while Blake Corum was barely getting any work in that offense. I think you're going to find someone else. They're going to find someone else to work in here. And Williams is going to see his efficiency drop in terms of, well, not efficiency, but his opportunities drop in this offense here. And if you can get a mid-first for him, that gets you opportunities to draft Henderson, the other guy from Ohio State, Hampton, one of these elite guys that are coming out of the draft here, I'm doing that and getting that plus maybe a second or another decent player in return, because I think Williams is solid. He's been fantastic, but opportunity with his size, I don't think can last very long in the NFL. And eventually they're going to find someone else to work in here. And if he gets hurt just one game, it's very easy for Sean McVay to completely switch his gear to somebody else and say, you're my guy now. Keep doing it until I tell you not to. And that's what's going to happen eventually with Williams. And I'd advise you to kind of move off him now if you could. So, all right, over to our next slide here. Over the Baltimore Ravens. That's where we're at now. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is a top 3-4 Dynasty wide quarterback. Yes. He's kind of a running back, but quarterback. Just continuing to be really dominant, especially in the passing game. Really good this past year. Love to see that from Lamar. Running backs, obviously Derrick Henry is coming back, and it's been great for his longevity of his career to be with a team that is like the Baltimore Ravens here. And I do expect him to continue to see maybe not 17 plus touchdowns or whatever he had, but still to put up RB2 numbers for us in 2025, despite his age in the NFL. Justice Hill, I think he either re-signed this offseason or he's a free agent. I don't remember offhand exactly, but he's a free agent. He is a free agent. But I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back. Nice veteran presence there, who's a good pass catcher, who's really good for this team, really helped this team out. Keontae Mitchell, definitely, flashed as a rookie. Didn't see much work in year 2 because he was hurt for a lot of the season. Rasheen Ali, another rookie from last year, didn't really see much work, but one of these guys could end up kind of jumping in as that RB2 if they don't bring back Hill. Wide receivers, Zay Flowers, we'll talk about him in a few here. Rashard Bateman kind of bounced back for his career, at least a little bit, to put some respect on his name after being a complete bust at this point, being a former first-round pick, but pretty solid season out of him. I think it was like 700 yards and 8 touchdowns for him. Really, definitely solid season, his best of his career. Deontay Johnson, he had a roller coaster being with many different teams throughout the years, but he was claimed by the Ravens before the end of the season. So he is a Raven at the moment until the new year starts. But his situation is going to be interesting. We'll see where team goes after him. And then they have their tight ends. There's amazing duo at tight end, Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, who combined for 17 touchdowns this past year, despite seeing barely over 100 targets combined. But this tight end core is really good. I think they hold themselves back a little bit. We'll see if they continue to roll both of them or if maybe they go and trade potentially one of them. I'll have to wait and see. But the biggest question for the Baltimore Ravens who we're going to have here is what to make of Zay Flowers here, Coach Tyler. Solid, better this season. To me, it always feels like Zay Flowers can have a really good game here and there, but then kind of disappears in this Ravens offense at times. And you're just wondering to yourself, where did he go? Because then Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and 20 touchdowns later, Derrick Henry gets the ball. But, what do you make of Zay Flowers moving forward in Dynasty? Is he, a wide receiver 2 value guy? Is he more of a wide receiver 3 boom or bust guy for you?
I really do have him as a wide receiver 3. He's on the, the borderline of that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 range. But I mean, you look at last year, we saw him coming out of his rookie season and we were like, oh my gosh, the Ravens have a receiver. Lamar has someone that's not playing the tight end position that can catch the balls. This is going to be great. Had 108 targets and 858 yards and a couple touchdowns. Like oh my gosh, this guy is going to do amazing. And he took that and turned it this year into 8 more targets, but somehow 3 less receptions and 200 more yards. But all that still finished him as the wide receiver 24 if you're in half PPR and then 25 if you're in full PPR. Like he got the work. He's not getting, a Puka Nacua level of targets, but he got the target share that he needed. And he still didn't turn it into a season that we are wanting to see. Now, it was an improvement from where he was by a whole, 3 points. But I just have him as a wide receiver 3 that has the ability to, go for 20 any given game, right? We see multiple 20-point games from him, but we also see a lot of single-digit games from him. And so it is one of those things. He is tied to one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He is in one of the most efficient and crazy to watch offenses in the league. And he is the wide receiver 1 on that team. But at the same time, he's not turning it into what we want to see in fantasy. And so I still have him as a wide receiver 3 that has the ability. I would go as far as saying boom or bust, like you said, right? Because we're seeing 20-point games at the same rate that we're seeing single-digit point games. And, that's not a guy that I overly trust as my wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 on my dynasty team, even if he is, young and tied to a Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, that's fair. I say I'm with me. I'm more of a wide receiver 3, and I'm still more of using Zay Flowers to sell off and get something better. Zay Flowers is fine. He's a fine wide receiver. He's going to continue to be a fine wide receiver, but I feel like there's always rumors about the Ravens going out and getting another wide receiver there. And I feel like if they go out there and get another wide receiver that actually is considered, I think for me, more of an elite wide receiver, I think that could hurt Zay Flowers' value overall, seeing, decent target share every week. He doesn't have a high touchdown upside. I think he was the one who had 5 and then 4 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons here. So I think there are some issues when it comes to Zay Flowers in terms of his upside. He's got a solid floor to him most weeks here, but for me, I think he's a wide receiver 3 that I'm more looking to sell than buy right now. All right. I think we're going to move on to our next team here. No. Yes, we are. We're actually going to move on to our next team here. Yes, I thought I deleted that slide before, but we are going to move. We're skipping a few slides here because we're getting crazy on time so far today. But starting off with the Detroit Lions here. Obviously, they have Jared Goff. Really struggled at times at this year, but really dominated for fantasy a lot of times here. He's kind of in that, early 30-year-old age now. I think he's 33 now. Ben Johnson's no longer with him, so we'll have to see how that works. Hendon Hooker is a backup who hasn't really gotten his shot yet, but an older backup at this point for him only being in the year for league for 2 years. I think he's 27 already. Running backs, they had their Sonic and Knuckles with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, just 2 dominant forces back there. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs was truly dominant without Dave Montgomery on the field, but they both should be back next season. Wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown, just another dominant force there. Again, I don't know if it was not as an elite as we wanted from him last year, but he was really, really good. Obviously, the improvement of Jameson Williams took some of his opportunity away, with JMO kind of just put himself on the map. Former first-round pick, finally got things going finally this past season here. They have Tim Patrick. I don't know who else they even have at wide receiver at this point anymore. I think they're going to be adding some new guys this coming off season here for sure. And then obviously tight end is Sam Laporta, a nice young dynasty tight end who should be good for the next 6 or 7 years for a dynasty roster there. Really kind of started getting things going later in the season after really fumbling early on in the year. But again, this Lions team has a lot of talent on it. But I think the biggest question is for, I think, us in Dynasty right now is, are there concerns with Ben Johnson leaving this team now? Coach Tyler?
I see some concerns, honestly, with the backfield. One of the big things that Ben Johnson did was he used Montgomery and Gibbs extremely efficiently. More so in real football terms, but also in fantasy. Both of them were viable guys. Both of them were putting up, Gibbs more than Montgomery because of his receiving work and explosiveness, but both of them were very viable players in your fantasy lineups. But the offensive coordinator that the Lions brought in was the pass game coordinator from the Broncos. And so you're getting a guy that is going to, want to throw the ball. He was the pass game coordinator. And I think that helps, Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams and Laporta because it might not be such a run-heavy team. But also with that, I feel like that hurts Montgomery because he might be a, touchdown-dependent player now. I'm not saying he's going to fall off the face of the earth, but if I'm, this new offensive coordinator coming in and I can give Jahmyr Gibbs, the touches that he saw at the end of the season, and he can be as effective as he was at the end of the season, that was his tryout for, hey, can this guy do it on his own? It
sure can.
extremely well. And so, I look at it and I see the backfield as the bigger problem than anything else with Ben Johnson leaving. But that's really the only concern I would have would be, what does David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs look like going into this next season? Because Jahmyr Gibbs proved he can do it on his own. I'm not saying that he can sustain, 100+ yards and multiple touchdowns a game over the course of a season with the workload that he got just for health reasons. And that's probably where David Montgomery steps in. But also, does David Montgomery, what does his role look like? Is he touchdown dependent? Is he going to be a Jamal Williams type where the Lions get down to the 1-2 yard line and it's just the Montgomery show and he's a top 5 running back? Or is it, he is a first down grinder still, but after that, Jahmyr Gibbs gets in and gets to run the show. So that's really the only concern that I see. But
yeah, no. It's going to be interesting what they do here. Ben Johnson was a really good OC. He really knew how to run this offense very well, and that's why I'm excited about him in Chicago a little bit there. Again, John Morton, it's, he's going to definitely switch some things up a little bit. We'll have to see kind of what his philosophy is going to be with this offense here, whether or not they continue to do more of a ground and pound or if they get back to more of the passing game, because that was kind of more of the thing where, the running backs will always seem to steal touchdowns, and that was a big thing. And then the passing game kind of got lackluster unless it made big plays at times. So we'll have to see what they do here. Do they go with more of a one-back set here? Do they air the ball out a little bit more? We'll have to wait and see. But there's definitely concerns. I'm definitely going to be a little cautious when it comes to a lot of these players here, outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, probably just a little bit moving forward. Not saying I want to get rid of any of them, but I'm definitely going to be a little bit more cautious and see how this new offensive looks in Detroit. I'd be looking to sell off Jared Goff, though. If I'm going to move somebody from this team, it's definitely going to be Goff right now. So I just feel like it's time to move off him if you can for a high price quarterback if you can find someone. Like I'd rather have Baker Mayfield than Jared Goff right now. That's how. So, all right, moving on to our next team. As you see a skip slide here, the Buffalo Bills here. Starting off with Josh Allen. Obviously, Josh Allen, top 3 fantasy quarterback right now. There's nothing wrong with that for Dynasty. Running game, James Cook is looking for a big contract as he's hit free agency. We'll kind of see what this team looks like if they decide to go after James Cook or whatnot. I think they could do better if they choose not to elect James Cook, but that's a different story there. Ray Davis is back there. He's another guy. Ty Johnson's a free agent, but all these running backs really performed well for this team this past season here at times. Really like that backfield if they keep them all together. Wide receivers wide, Khalil Shakir, I didn't mention this, but signed a 4-year deal, $60 million contract. Great for him. Love to see him kind of get his worth. I think he did really solid this year. I still think that there's better upside for him to come if he can just take that next step. Amari Cooper definitely failed in Buffalo. We'll have to wait and see what team he lands with moving forward. Keon Coleman is definitely a guy that we're going to look to hopefully rise in year 2. Flashed a little bit at times. Curtis Samuel's there still. Again, he's kind of past his prime in terms of being really anything for fantasy. Dalton Kincaid, we'll talk about him in a few seconds, but young tight end still looking to kind of make his mark at the NFL level in terms of really just taking that next step and making a name for himself. I feel like he hasn't done that. And Dawson Knox, just a solid veteran tight end backing him up. So, all right. So the question for the Buffalo Bills here is Dalton Kincaid heading in the wrong direction for Dynasty right now? I think a lot of people expected him to take that next step to be the wide receiver 1 for this team. Just really wasn't. Solid yardage, low touchdowns, but definitely didn't really take that necessary step to kind of make that leap to like, oh, he's legit one of the top 3 tight ends in Dynasty. I still probably have a bunch of guys over him right now, but how do you feel about Dalton Kincaid?
Yeah, I do feel like Dalton Kincaid kind of did go in the wrong direction. I mean, in your PPR leagues, he was averaging 7 points a game, and that's not what you want out of your tight end, especially if you were drafting him or trading for him. Like, everyone thought he was going to be basically the wide receiver 1. He was going to be the, OG Mark Andrews to Lamar Jackson for this Bills offense. And he was just the actual opposite of that. And I think that he did move in the wrong direction because now we have multiple tight ends coming into the draft that, there's not only guys that established themselves last year or took a step last year, but now you have, at the least, you've got 3 or 4 tight ends coming into the league. You've got Tyler Warren, you've got Colson Loveland, you've got Harold Fannin Jr., and you've got Gunnar Helm. You've got 4 guys that could easily go out there if, put on a team that uses their tight end and put up more than 7.8 points a game. And so I think that he is 100% trending in the wrong direction as of right now because we expected him to take this jump and we saw nothing. It's not like, Josh Allen wasn't putting up a MVP contending caliber season. Like, he was in the race down to the end. And Dalton Kincaid was just not a huge help in that. And so I think that he's trending in the wrong direction because, we saw guys like Brock Bowers come into the league and just take it by storm, right? We saw people solidify their name in year 2 or 3 of the receiving game, or as a tight end in the receiving game. And now we have possibly 4 or more tight ends that are going to come in next season and overdo what Dalton Kincaid is doing. Like, I don't think he's moving in the right direction at all. I don't necessarily want to say I take that as a sell him unless you are able to go get, say, a Tyler Warren type guy. But I don't have high hopes for what he's going to be as of right now when there are so many guys that were able to take those steps or could possibly be coming in to take that first step this upcoming season.
Yeah, no, like I'm concerned about him. The thing was decent was that he had 75 targets. That was second on the team for targets, but his catch rate was like 53%, really bad. Just 2 touchdowns on the season here. Like, yeah, I know Josh Allen's ran 12 in. It's not ideal for skilled players, but the hope is that he can still bounce back. He's going into year 3, but he's a bit of an older player. He wasn't a young sprout coming in. He wasn't a 21-year-old tight end coming in. He was already 24. I believe he's going to be 26 this year. This is like a kind of like a put up or shut up kind of thing with Dalton Kincaid. He had solid games at times, first half of the season here, 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. If you doubled that up, you're looking at, 600 yards and 700 yards almost and 4 touchdowns. That's solid production if he would have got that far. But he did get hurt at some times. And the games that he came back and played were really lackluster for the most part there. And he kind of just needs to get back on track. But do the Bills bring another weapon in? That's the issue. They bring a guy who's going to command closer to 100 targets with Shakir, and Dalton Kincaid kind of gets left in the dust. That's from my concerns. They obviously like to get Dawson Knox involved at times, which is definitely concerning. I mean, Knox had, decent. He had, 8 targets to Kincaid's, 16 in the final 3 weeks of the season. So, I mean, he had like half the amount of targets than him and still got on the field and was producing. So that's part of my concern, is that Dawson Knox is going to be there. And if they bring in another wide receiver that they try to with Amari Cooper, Kincaid might not have that upside that we really want right now. And he might be heading in the wrong direction for fantasy right now, unfortunately. All right, over to the Kansas City Chiefs, the Super Bowl losers. Obviously, Pat Mahomes is there. Whether you believe he still has a chance to still bounce back after some mediocre performances the last few years, that's up to you. But obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs really like him. Running backs, Isaiah Pacheco. I will talk about him in a few there, but obviously sits at the RB1 slot for now. We'll have to see how that goes. Kareem Hunt is a free agent. I don't know if the team brings him back or not. As they try to look for maybe younger, more talented players. Samaje Perine's also a free agent. Great pass catching back, but again, he's a bit of an older bunch. Carson Steele had touches in that offense there. Wide receivers wise, they're starting to get kind of set there. I mean, Rishi Rice, as long as we'll have to see how much he plays this year based on his injury / legal concerns. But he looks like a wide receiver 1 when he's playing on the field. Xavier Worthy really started stepping up late in the season, and obviously you saw what he was able to do in the Super Bowl despite it being a late game, but big upside from him. DeAndre Hopkins is a free agent this year. I don't know if they're going to bring him back or not. Juju also is a free agent. I'm not sure if they're going to bring him back or not. We already know that Travis Kelce is returning for at least one more season for the Kansas City Chiefs. So he's going to be their starter there. I mean, Noah Gray, I think he is still on I think he still has another year on the team there. But he was pretty solid at times as well, filling in for a nice bye week replacement for fantasy at times. So, but biggest question for this Kansas City Chiefs team is that we need an answer for dynasty owners is that, are there major concerns? I changed from concerns to major concerns with Isaiah Pacheco right now.
Yeah, I do see a lot of concerns with Pacheco. Obviously we look at the injury this season that limited him in his play a lot. And when he came back, he saw a couple games with some double-digit touches, but after that, it was, you got 9 carries and 1 reception, you got 6 carries, you've got the rest week in week 18, and then you see 5 carries, no receptions in the divisional. You see 5 carries, 2 receptions in the conference championships. You see 3 carries and 1 reception in the Super Bowl. I just think that there are concerns with Pacheco, not only because of his health, but again, because of the rookies coming in, right? Like I said, there are a lot of players that these teams view as, these elite assets. There are a lot of guys that are going to be able to come in and make noise immediately for these teams as they're drafted in the first 2 or 3 rounds, right? This isn't last year's draft where you have an injured Jonathan Brooks going in round 2 and you've got Trey Benson going in round 3 and you're just kind of hoping for the best. And then you're taking some late round flyers, right? You've got, your first round of rookie drafts is for the most part going to be running backs. And most of those running backs are going to be taken within the first 3 rounds. And so I see the Chiefs as being one of those prime position teams, sitting at 31 to go out and get, if Amarion Hampton is sitting there, go get Amarion Hampton. If Travion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins is there, Go get one of them, right?
Ooh.
Caleb Johnson might fall right into their lap, just a grinder for Iowa. Like, there's so many guys that could fall to them at 31, and there's some positions of need for the Chiefs, but nothing that could be as glaring as maybe just getting that upgrade as a running back, right? This team is obviously changing their mojo and their scheme as they go, right? It's not just let Mahomes and Travis Kelce, and when they had Tyreek Hill just go play catch all day. Like, they're not playing backyard ball anymore. They have to run a sustainable offense because Travis Kelce is getting older and less efficient, right? You had Rashee Rice out this year with the knee injury, and then even coming back next year, there's a chance that he's suspended for we don't even know how many games. They're throwing, 28, 30-year-old receivers out there that can't move like they used to. And so this offense is just kind of built on, we trust Patrick Mahomes and he's going to take us where we need to go. And so I think getting one of those, top 2 round running backs and really kind of being in that perfect position at the end of round 1 to go get one of those top name running backs and get that 5th-year option on them, that bodes a lot better than what they could possibly get in free agency. That bodes a lot better than, trying to run it with Isaiah Pacheco and hoping that he returns to the angry runner that he was not this previous season, but the season before. And so I find concerns with him just because of the workload when he got back, not necessarily being was he fully healthy or not, but just looking at the workload numbers that we have. But also the fact that this is a draft where everyone is highly touting this running back group as outstanding. And the Chiefs aren't in a position that they have, too many needs to go and spend a first-round pick on a guy that could spend the next 5 years in the backfield with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. With this backfield, I have major concerns. I don't think Isaiah Pacheco is going to be the RB1 all season long there. I think we've seen enough of Pacheco where, yes, he's a hard runner, but availability is the best ability when it comes to fantasy running backs. And Pacheco's missed time. He's got hurt. He runs too hard sometimes. And what we saw from the Chiefs in the playoffs is that they don't have a strong run game. And that's kind of, I think, part of their reason right now is that they need to take the pressure off having to force the throw constantly and get a good run game. Like, I don't even remember last year if there was a game where they had a really good run week outside of touchdowns. And I don't count touchdowns as a good run week there. I mean, looking back now, looking at Isaiah Pacheco, he had 90 yards in one game early on in the season. Then he got hurt. That was probably his best game of the season here. And it was probably a really strong game from any fantasy running back. No one else really did. I mean, Carson Steele had 17 carries for 72 yards in week 3. Kareem Hunt was fresh in the beginning of the season, but he had 100 yards 2 different times off of 27 carries. That's not great, And then looking in the back half of the season, I mean, his best game was 16 carries for 68 yards. Like, there's no running upside for this backfield, and they need to find someone. And with Pacheco, he's shown that he can't stay healthy for a whole season. And I think they're going to let him run out his contract here next year. He's got 1 year left, and they're going to look for someone in the draft. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did. They need to find a running back that can play all 3 downs. Like what teams did this year? The Packers, the Ravens, the Eagles. They went and got elite running backs because whether or not you want to pay for a running back, you don't want to. Having an elite running back is very helpful, and it can be if you know how to build the rest of your team up well. And some NFL teams can't do that. The Chiefs are a team that can probably figure it out. They need to get themselves a good running back that can provide elite upside. They have that. That allows Mahomes to do what Mahomes is able to do here at times on the field here. So I think Pacheco is dangerously becoming a jump off the ship sell right now, and getting a 2nd round pick from him if you can. And just taking one of these young running backs, because holding on to Isaiah Pacheco right now could end up being a really bad mistake for you come October, November of this season. All right, one last team here, and we will wrap things up. Philadelphia Eagles, Super Bowl champions. Congrats to them. Jalen Hurts, obviously top 6, top 5 fantasy quarterback, elite, great running, push, whether or not be banned or not, it's a different story, but really good dynasty running quarterback right now. Running backs, obviously Saquon Barkley. We'll talk about him in a moment, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Kenneth Gainwell's a free agent. Will Shipley, it's just kind of a backup, nothing more than that. A.J. Brown, we know the wide receiver core with A.J. Brown. There was some little awkwardness at the end of the season with him and his, lackluster performances that he was unhappy about and opportunity. Hoping that won't take into any effects this year, but elite for the Eagles since being there. Really dominant force. Again, at times he can kind of disappear, unfortunately, but a dominant force. Same with Devonta Smith. Can randomly just be dominant at times, but also can kind of be mediocre way too often than not. They did trade for Jahan Dotson, but he was a real bust outside of fucking scoring in the Super Bowl. Dallas Goedert has been a consistent, solid tight end for the Eagles, and as he should be. So the final question of the night here for this Philadelphia Eagles, with the RB1 history, Coach Tyler, obviously it hasn't happened often, but running backs who finish RB1 in fantasy usually don't finish RB1 in fantasy the next season here, which would put Saquon Barkley 1, 4, 10 spots down from where he's at this coming season here. He also ran the ball a lot, saw a ton of carries in this Philadelphia offense. I think, if I'm not mistaken, career highs across the board. But you're looking at a guy who has 345 rushing attempts and add another 33 receptions, close to 400 yards on the season with 15 touchdowns. Are there concerns with Barkley heading into 2025, or are you going to say, I'm rocking and rolling whatever he gives me this year?
I, as someone who won leagues on the back of Saquon Barkley this season, I'm a rock and roll, right? We saw Barkley, and this Eagles offense and this Eagles offensive line made him look like the running back that we knew that he was, right? It threw me back to rookie Saquon Barkley. He's out there breaking off 60-plus yard touchdowns. He's jumping over people backwards. He's hitting spin moves and doing all the things you want to see out of him, right? This is who Saquon Barkley is that we remember, and this is the reason everyone that cares about Saquon Barkley, fantasy or not, wanted him to get out of New York. And he came out and he did it, right? And we've seen Saquon Barkley be the number one running back before in history, right? It was a couple years ago, his rookie season. Like I said, it threw me back to rookie season Saquon. But he was number one in PPR scoring. And, he had a lot more receptions than he did rushes. But he had, just about the same amount of touches total as he did this past season, right? He had 261 carries and 91 receptions as opposed to the 245 and 33 that he had this year. So if my math is right, he had
345.
Did I say 245? 345.
Yeah,
I was thinking of the 261 still. But yeah. So he's, he had 20 less touches in his previous RB1 season. In the next season, he went out and put up RB10 across half and full PPR in 13 games, right? He still hit 1,000 yards rushing. A lot of that did come receiving. He had 52 receptions that year. But he still went out and in not a full season was a top 10 running back. I don't think he repeats as the RB1. I think that is just too – the odds are not ever in your favor to try and guess who that would be, much less try and guess it a year after they do it. We've seen that with Christian McCaffrey. We've seen that with, like Saquon Barkley, his rookie season. We've seen that all the time in history, right? And that's where those concerns come in, is we're like, he's done it, so we expect him to do it again. I don't expect Saquon Barkley to do it again. Do I expect Saquon Barkley to be a top 8 running back next year behind – the same offensive line with the same efficiency that the Eagles showed this year? Yeah. I feel like that's not crazy to expect. I don't think he's going to be the RB1, and I wouldn't put I wouldn't put more than 25 cents on him being the RB1. But that doesn't mean that he won't be a RB1. If someone is willing to pay some crazy price for him, you go ahead and sell him, right? If someone came to me today and was offering me Bijan plus for Saquon Barkley, which I don't think ever would happen, but if someone sent me that, please send it to me right now in any of my leagues that I have Barkley, because I'll hit accept in a heartbeat. But, Saquon Barkley came out and looked like it was just a new iteration of Saquon Barkley, right? Like I said, it threw me back to rookie Saquon. This wasn't Saquon that was with the Giants the last couple of years. This wasn't Saquon that, we had seen hampered by injuries and we had seen just kind of beat up because he was getting all these useless touches. This was, let's put an elite athlete behind a well-working offensive line, make him not the only star in the offense, and he can do what he needs to do. I would put all my bets on him being at least top 8, if not top 5. I don't know that I'd put anything on him being RB1 again, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that with this same offensive line and same offense that he could get in that race towards the end of next season.
All right. I like it. I like it a lot there. All right. Well, we are going to wrap things up for the night, guys. We hope you enjoyed today's episode here. We're going to continue to rock and roll this off season here. The next couple of weeks, you got some free agency stuff. We're going to mix a few things in. Maybe we'll do a mock draft next week or something. Kind of have a little bit of leeway over the next 2 weeks here before we start talking rookies at the end of the month here. We're going to go through a whole rookie preview over 4 weeks before the NFL draft. So if you want to know about these rookies, you really want to tune in for those because they're going to be really strong episodes there. So, Coach Tyler, is there anything you want to listen say before we get going?
Yeah, go check out Dynasty Nerds. I know Coach Steve was talking about it as we got into the show, but go check out Dynasty Nerds. Like we said, as we get into this rookie season, obviously come check us out, come hear what we have to say about it. But there's a lot of content being pushed out over there, right? Rookie mock drafts, draft profiles on all these players that are worth looking at with your even third round picks. And a lot of just great tools that are available over there, right? Use code COACH when you get over there, sign up, let them know that we sent you. And you get access to things like the Dynasty GM, right? It's about time to start trading for those picks. Those picks are not going to be anywhere near as valuable as the next month. And so you're looking at values on picks and players as you're making trades. You can go through the trade browser and see, you have your eye on someone, see what other people in other same formatted leagues are doing. Or if you want to do all the grind work yourself, please, again, come watch us. But then jump in the Dynasty film room, right? We talk about Amarion Hampton. We talk about Quinshon Judkins, and you want to see what we're talking about? Go over there, right? Our editors, they do so good with that all-22 film. Just spend hours in there because that's what I'll be doing over the next couple of weeks preparing for our rookie shows. So go check out Dynasty Nerds. Use code COACH when you get over there. Let them know that we sent you, and thank y'all so much for listening.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. And we thank you guys for tuning in on our YouTube channel. We appreciate it always. If you have a chance to stop in, I know I messed up on one of our chat questions earlier, but we're on a new platform, so I didn't really see it down there. But please come in and stop in, ask some questions. You have Dynasty trade, you're in between players, in between picks. Let us know. We're here to help you guys out. We're trying to help you guys win the offseason so you can win a championship in 2025. And as always, if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we appreciate you guys as well. And we continue to hope you guys continue to rate and review our show. Again, we do this for free, guys. We don't make money on this. So this is our way to just kind of help out the fantasy community, give them graded fantasy advice. And that's what we're going to continue to do for this season here. So we thank you guys all for tuning in and listening. We'll be back next Monday talking some more fantasy football talk here. Until then, guys, have a great one.